So yeah, what we're going to run through is a little bit of context in terms of how we've got to where we are. Chris Woodcock from Public Health is going to give us a gallop through the Equally Well strategy, which was published by our Health and Wellbeing Board towards the end of last year. Matt from Good Lab and Louise Telford are going to talk through the application process. Matt is then going to say more about our approach around monitoring, evaluation and learning. And then Mandy's going to talk about the kind of support that can be accessed through the Council's leisure and wellbeing team. And then, as I say, there is an opportunity for questions and answers towards the end. If you've got any burning questions, or if you've got a question and you don't want to just hold it in your head till we get to that point, feel free to put it in the chat. The likelihood is we will address it during the final half an hour bit, which I guess allows us to hopefully move quite efficiently through the other business. Okay, so that's the plan. In terms of context, just to give people an idea of I guess how we've got where we are and what has come before. The Better Together group has been established since 2018, so that's made up of Voda, North Tyneside Council and North Tyneside CCG, and it was established to help kind of further nurture relationships across the sectors and also look at ways that we can work together to build the capacity of the voluntary community and social enterprise sector in order that residents get a better deal from us all. As a result of that group being established, in 2019, North Tyneside Clinical Commissioning Group launched a brand new grants programme for the voluntary community and social enterprise sector with the support of Voda and North Tyneside Council. And a number of grants, some of which are over 3 years, were awarded. And we are starting to see some real successful outcomes as a result of some of that work. So one great example would be the work that the Linskill Centre have had funded to develop their men's shed project. So yeah, acknowledging that this isn't the first grants programme that's come from the group. And then towards the end of last year, North Tyneside Health and Wellbeing Board published a new health and wellbeing strategy called Equally Well, which Chris is going to guide us through shortly. And then as soon as we came back from our Christmas break, we launched the new Health Inequalities Fund, which is the fund that we're here to talk about this morning. A little bit of context in terms of the fund. Although Voda has been tasked with kind of leading on the design and the implementation of the fund, the money has come from North Tyneside CCG and North Tyneside Council, and Voda's role is to remain an independent, transparent facilitator. So Voda isn't involved in any of the decision making. The decision making will be very much in the hands of North Tyneside Council and North Tyneside CCG. Yeah, so I guess that's a kind of a 4-year plotted history of how we've got to this point. And I guess this point is the fact that we've now got a brand new fund, which is targeted at organisations within the voluntary community and social enterprise sector that are currently working in North Tyneside. And there's a couple of things that fund aims to do, and we'll hear a little bit more about this later on in the event, but it's very much focused on health inequalities in line with the new Equally Well strategy. But it's also focused on getting an understanding of the impact of different approaches. And I was in a meeting with Gary Charlton from North Tyneside CCG this morning, where we were agreeing that actually the ideal scenario is some of these grants then become kind of mainstreamed commissions through CCG, possibly through the council. So I guess what we're looking at is testing different approaches in the hope that some of these approaches will be so successful that the CCG and others may want to commission them as a kind of more mainstream and more securely funded provision in the borough. Yeah, and I guess a brief overview is, as stated on our website, the grants will be between £10,000 and £30,000 per grant. The time frame of activity that can be funded is between the 1st of May this year and the 30th of September next year. And deadlines for applications is noon on the 15th of February. So yeah, so that's what the fund's all about. We're going to hear later on a little bit more about it and how organisations can go about applying for funds. The themes have been designed to mirror the Equally Well strategy. So the 3 themes that organisations can apply under are equal life chances for all. So that one's very much around supporting people to live healthier lifestyles. Thriving places and communities, which is focused around supporting people to make the best use of green and blue spaces and community facilities in the borough. And maintaining independence, which has a focus on those people who were required to shield during the pandemic, and as a result may have lost some of their confidence, some of their independence, and may be experiencing loneliness and isolation. That information is on the Voda website, along with a little bit of narrative to give people a bit more context around what the panel will be looking for under those 3 themes. Okay, so that's the context. Now going to hand over to Chris Woodcock from North Tyneside's public health team, who is going to speak to us about the Equally Well strategy.
Thank you, Robin. Bear with me 1 second and I'll attempt to share a presentation. I can't.
Chris, I'll make you a co-host, Chris, and then you should be able to do it. 1 moment. Okay, do you want to try again, Chris? That should work now.
Yeah, sorry, I'll bear with me 1 sec. Apologies all. Is that now up?
It is, yeah. Thanks, Chris.
So thank you, Robin, and hello everyone. So my name is Chris Woodcock, part of the public health team at the local authority. I will give you a hopefully very whistle-stop tour of the recently published Equally Well, A Healthier, Fairer Future for North Tyneside. So this is the Health and Wellbeing Board's Health and Wellbeing Strategy for 21 to 25. This has, and I'm sure everybody's very familiar with all this, so apologies if it's repetitive, but the board is made up of a number of different organisations who have been involved in the creation of this strategy and who have kind of signed up and adopting what will be within it, the principles that are within it, and any subsequent action plans that will come from the strategy itself. And I do think that's just quite an important point to kind of highlight at the beginning, that this isn't a council strategy. This is the health and wellbeing strategy for North Tyneside. So hopefully what's in it won't be a surprise to anyone, but I guess I've always found it quite assuring that it's kind of a commitment that will be made across the borough, which can only be for the good. So I guess first thing, just to highlight is in relation to health inequalities themselves. And again, I'm sure we're all very familiar with this, but a working definition is that they are unfair and avoidable differences of health across a population between different groups. They're classed as unfair because they're not random or by chance, but largely socially determined, and importantly, not inevitable. There are a number of ways that they can exist. So a few are highlighted in there. So age, disability, gender, things of that ilk that can be derived by kind of your socioeconomic status. So that's your kind of consequences or lack of education, your levels of employment, occupation, the community groups that you belong to, and whether and if they are disadvantaged, and also kind of geographical, just by nature of where you live, which will have access to opportunities and or not, and the implications of that on your health outcomes, or in fact any social outcomes as well. I suppose inequalities themselves that aren't new. We've all heard about them for a very long time. I think from my perspective, the impact of the pandemic, certainly when kind of COVID first hit and was occasionally described as being indiscriminate, it turned out it followed like most of the rest of health and being completely discriminate. So those who are more disadvantaged, who are from more deprived communities, people with poorer health outcomes, older people were all more likely to suffer consequences of COVID. So it really kind of shone a light on it. And if we were to consider, even from a respiratory illness and infectious disease, how are we going to prevent poor outcomes moving forward, then we do have to think from a prevention perspective and those groups that are more likely to suffer negative consequences. So pleasingly, it has kind of shone that light back on inequalities. The strategy itself takes a life course approach. So that moves us from kind of all the way through an individual's life, pre-conception, all the way through older people. Within it embeds Marmot principles. I'm sure many of you have heard of Marmot before, but these are evidence-based focal points for kind of any strategy to be considering, particularly obviously around health predominantly. Giving every child the best start in life, so that's kind of related to the first 1,000 days and the importance of those in everybody's outcomes, enabling children to have their maximize their capabilities, all the way through to kind of healthy and sustainable places and communities, and you'll see these themes kind of play out as the strategy becomes clearer. It's also, and it's a bit of a long-winded pompous term, but built around proportionate universalism, and that is that kind of to reduce the gradient in health, we need things that kind of reach everyone, but are more focused on areas that require it more. Again, that might seem very clear and obvious, but it hasn't been happening as much as it potentially should have been. So hopefully through the strategy and programs and initiatives such as this, it'll become more prevalent. So where are we now? Again, these figures might not be a surprise to many of you, but if we're looking at even within borough, men and women from the most deprived areas live shorter lives compared to residents from our least deprived areas. So that can be 11.7 years less for men and 10.6 years less for women. If you were to look at life expectancy from birth, 82 years for females in some of our more affluent wards, as the average, but that range will go from 77 years to 89 years. So that's the kind of gap. Same for males, 72 years to 83 years. So actually where you live within North Tyneside can have a quite significant impact upon your life and your life expectancy. Healthy life expectancy. So that is the period of your time that you can expect to live in good health, or I guess conversely without poor health. There's a difference between males and females, so all these things kind of start to drive questions about why that may be. Somebody with serious mental illness will die 20 years earlier than average in the general population. So the inequalities gap has been known about for a long time, and it's not closing, and if anything, it's begun to widen over recent years. So if you think of all of the improvements that have been made across the country, across the borough, but inequalities continue to be pretty stubborn, which kind of suggests why we need to consider doing things slightly differently. Again, just expanding some of that a little bit more. and all of this information is available, publicly available, particularly on the local authority's website around its JSNA pages, and it's the various borough profiles are an excellent source of information if you ever need it. But children living in poverty, so there can be over a third in our most deprived wards compared to 2.6 in our less deprived wards. And again, if you consider kind of best start in life, then those children, through no choice of their own, are already starting at a disadvantage. 1 in 4 of our residents have a long-term health problem in our less affluent areas, but that's only 1 in 6 in our most affluent areas. Those with long-term health conditions are less likely or are employed at a lower rate than those with better health. Again, some of that may be abundantly clear, but if you consider the outcomes and the implications of your employment, of your income, then somebody already living in poor health will further be disadvantaged. Again, depending on the nature of that occupation, that has an impact, or can be seen through some behaviours, and particularly some poorer health behaviours. So in relation to those who smoke, if you're a routine and manual worker, you're over 2.5 times more likely to smoke compared to other occupational groups. And I guess stating something fairly obvious, it's nothing necessarily about the occupation itself, but what is it culturally that kind of creates or drives more people to smoke from those groups and communities. And there's some of the things that we're hoping to look at, explore, tackle throughout the strategy and through programs such as this. So as Robin's already touched on, there's some strategic ambitions within that. Equal chances for all. Taking that kind of life course approach that we've already touched on, thriving places and communities. Again, as Robin has already said, probably within that there's something about the environment, the places where we live, access to green space, blue space, parks, woods, whatever it may be, all those things that we know are really beneficial for people's lives and health, and aren't always equal across the borough, and maintaining independence, again, is touched on, particularly for those that have had to shield as a consequence for the pandemic, excuse me, and the implications that may have had on themselves from kind of an isolation, loneliness, confidence, anxiety, all those products of shielding and the pandemic that have affected somebody's independence. And again, as I'm sure we're very familiar, those who lack independence, they will more likely to have poor health outcomes. So there's various ways that the strategy itself will consider some of these things. It'll look at our health, behaviours and lifestyles. So tackling the barriers to poor health, as I say, not solely considering it just from the behaviour perspective. So if somebody is, for argument's sake, smoking, clearly that's not ideal. It's not just the case of telling that individual to stop smoking. It is considering the rest of that individual's life that may either kind of is enabling them to smoke or making it really difficult for them to stop. So there is that kind of consideration of an individual in their life. That kind of links across to the wider determinants of health. So obviously the consideration of all of those things, for early years, education, levels of employment, all those things are within consideration of the strategy, as we know they are significant determinants of the health outcome of our population. Again, consideration of where places are, the communities, how integrated, how well knit, where they are, where they live, all those key aspects that kind of, again, have a significant impact on an individual's health. It's about understanding the needs and assets within our communities and how we can build them back together into an impactful strategy and action plan, and how the health and care system is integrated. Yes, in turn, the kind of various national moves to do that, but also from a local perspective, through programs such as this. So the example Robin just gave with conversations with Gary at the CCG about how do we better connect the system and kind of fund programs that work for our communities. I guess some of the other guiding principles and things for us from the strategy perspective to consider is the full kind of reach and armory of the different organisations involved to tackle those inequalities. If you look at that triangle, I guess from lots of times you'll see programs that are service based, and that's a way of impacting somebody's life quite clearly. You'll see a lot of action plans that have a focus on interventions, on programs, obviously through groups such as yourselves, how we can impact the community, how we can build up a community, how we can have community-based initiatives, and that's that kind of left-hand aspects of the triangle, and then the top bit, particularly for some organizations, it's those civic level interventions. It's how does it begin to shape and change the environment that people live within. And so I guess from a local authority perspective, that could be planning or regeneration programs, and how do they change and shape the places that we live. So again, kind of, it is the delivery of those ambitions, as we already touched on, through those Marmot principles. I guess it's how do they kind of manifest and then kind of get developed into an action plan. So what we've already got is lots of good practice across North Tyneside. If we're to consider the kind of the communities and the places people live within, it's how do we further develop those? So what programs are beneficial? How do we keep services local, free, low cost, accessible? How do we support communities to access outdoor spaces, make public areas nice? How do we, as a board, all those collective organisations, improve rental accommodation or whatever it may be? So it is considering that in its totality. Strength and role and impact of health prevention. Again, as we've touched upon, there's definitely clearly some key behaviours that have a significant impact upon the social gradient. It cites a few there: smoking, obesity, lack of physical activity, poor nutrition. Smoking, for instance, is one of the most significant impacts upon health inequalities across the country and within the borough. As I've already said, if we solely look at the individual and their behaviour, will probably have limited impact. It's how do we kind of shape the community and the world around them to enable people to make healthier choices where they can, and to remove any barriers that kind of inhibited them from making those better choices. And then kind of as I touched on, the integration of health and social care, there's some great examples, again, that have been underway for a long time across the borough. There's some significant ones now around Backwith and the Age and Well village, and a range of partners working together there to kind of create a real kind of multi-generational living and well-being complex that will be, if anyone's ever seen any of the plans, a stunning place to live for many of our residents. And it is that kind of collective integrated approach to delivering a better quality of care. So I guess that was all very high level, and hopefully just give you a bit of a flavour on the strategy itself. The next stage for it will be the development of an action plan. Some of you may already be involved in some of those conversations around that. I know some colleagues such as Healthwatch are considering about how that action plan might look within North Tyneside and within our communities, to try and do that is a more of a co-production type approach. I guess another way of looking at it is through funds like this. So absolutely, there's been lots of fantastic work, as Robin's already touched on, through the Better Together working group for a number of years. This time round, it is more about the focus on inequalities and what we can do in areas to help tackle them. So not solely to improve outcomes, though quite clearly improving outcomes is a fantastic target, but to really consider how and where we're doing this to try and address some inequalities as we go. So yeah, I think this is one of the many approaches hopefully you'll begin to see from a range of partners about how we are trying to tackle inequalities, and absolutely in partnership with the community. I think that's probably it for me now, Robin.
Thanks, Chris. Brilliant. Yeah, much appreciated, Chris. So as I'd put in the chat, the Equally Well strategy is available for download and is definitely a useful reference when preparing your application. And also, just as Chris touched on there, that I guess what the Health and Wellbeing Board has signed off is the high-level strategy. What hasn't yet been developed is the action plan. So there will be, over the next few months, a programme of community consultation, so that through the likes of yourselves, the Health and Wellbeing Board can kind of hear the voices of local residents, which hopefully will begin to give some shape to the action plan. Okay, thank you, Chris. So I would now like to introduce Matt Wilson from Good Lab. Good Lab is a consultancy, local consultancy firm, and Matt has been pivotal to us getting to where we are so far. So I'm going to hand over to Matt, and also Louise Telford, who I guess will kind of do a double act with Matt in terms of the kind of nuts and bolts of applying for funds. Thanks, Matt.
Great, thank you, Robin. Hi, everyone, and hi to Louise as well. I'm assuming you're on the call. I've not seen you yet.
Hi, Matt.
Ah, there you are. Great. Louise, I'm actually imagining, I'm probably going to kind of keep my powder dry for talking about the learning side and the impact side of this. And so I was thinking that you probably may have more to say about I can talk about the technical side of the application process, but in terms of what we're looking for from people, and how to write a good application, that maybe or at least how to comply with the various stages of the application. Is that what you were thinking that you might speak to?
Yeah, we can do that. Do you want to say a few things about the form, and
yeah, okay.
Particularly around people might want to fill it in, about needing to fill it in one go? I was thinking that kind of thing might be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
For a start. All
right. So it's a two-stage process. That's the first thing that everybody needs to know. And it's supported behind the scenes by a database that automates a little bit of the process as well. So in all voters' publicity that's gone out about this, there's a link to voters' website, and that gives you a page which has got a variety of guidance on it. It may even be worth me just sort of showing you this on screen now, and walking you through it a little bit. So if we go on voters homepage, I believe this is voters homepage here. Doesn't look like it's got much on it there. Oh, there we are. So I'm pretty sure that in the news and events section, there we are. The top thing there is the Health Inequalities Fund. So it gives you the introduction that Robin's just given you verbally. It describes the online application process. You see that's there in blue, that's important. And here in blue, an offline version. So if you click this offline version, it will actually download a Word document for you that's got all the questions in so that you can have a look at them beforehand. Because we know that a lot of people, if you have to come to the screen, sit down in one sitting and do the whole thing, that can present a challenge. So you can prepare your answers beforehand. But if you click this blue link here, it will take you to the stage 1 application, which is essentially just a registration and eligibility check. Clearly, there's certain conditionality around applying. So once you've just given the name of your organisation and your own contact details, it's essentially making sure that you are a voluntary sector organisation and that you meet a number of conditions around independence on your board, currently being active in North Tyneside, and actually having a project that fits into one of those 3 themes. So that's the sort of very basic stuff. And I know that at least 20 or so organisations have already been through that eligibility check. And immediately that you've registered, the system does a little bit of maths behind the scenes and will send you one of 2 emails. It will either send you an email straight away saying, you've passed eligibility, here's the link for your stage 2 application, or it will say, really sorry, you failed your eligibility test, but it will give you an email address, somebody nice at Voda who might have some other opportunities that you might be able to apply for funding for. So that's the stage 1 process. Stage 2, very similar. Once you've clicked on that link, we've not had any stage 2 applications yet. We're not really expecting to receive any for the next couple of weeks at least, because you'll be wanting to work on those applications. But again, if I just show you what the stage 2 application looks like, so that you've got a sort of a heads up about that. Again, it's hosted on the Voda website. Obviously, we're not sharing the link to this publicly, he says, and then let me just find that again. I think I almost accidentally shared the link to it then, which I didn't want to. That's the last thing I wanted to do. I'm wondering how I can show you that page without showing you the link to it. Just 1 second. I thought I'd removed it from.
Matt, would it be worth showing the document, the Word document, because that's got all the questions in, hasn't it?
Sure, maybe we'll just do that instead. Yeah. Okay. So you'll recall just a second ago, I clicked that download link on the Voda website, and it downloaded a Word document for me. So this is it. So it gives you a lot of guidance about every question that's on the form, and you can, of course, you can use this document to then prepare your own answer to the question, so that when you come back to the website, you can just sort of cut and paste it in the box, rather than having to sort of sweat in front of the screen thinking, I'm going to be able to get this done by 5 o'clock or whatever. So we would encourage you, prepare your answers at stage 2 before you actually get to the form itself and submit them. Give yourself a little bit of time. Don't leave it till the very last minute. And the Voda team are around if you're finding any questions particularly difficult or confusing or ambiguous. Hopefully we've weeded through them sufficiently so that they're nice and clear, but it ought to be fairly straightforward, really. Louise?
Hi, I just wondered if it would be worth me going through that document, if you could share it on the screen, Matt, the one you've just shown, and I'll use it to talk through the application. That might help people. Okay, great. Yeah, is that okay? If you would mind sharing that, that'd be great. So we've prepared 2 documents which I hope will help you when you're filling out your application when you get to the stage 2 process. So one is a frequently asked questions document, which has got lots of information if you've got a question on your on a specific question in the form. So that might be if you can get help to complete the form, when the decisions will be made, what the expectations around monitoring and evaluation, things around accounts and what you need to submit for accounts and things like that. So there's a document there that has questions in there that we think people would quite often ask, and there's hopefully some helpful answers in there for you about each question. We've also broken down each question and given you some guidance in the way that you would fill the form out, so you should be able to see some guidance on each question if you go through this spreadsheet. And so hopefully that will be useful. Sorry, this table, hopefully that will be useful for you. I'll just take you through each set of questions, just so you've got an idea about what it would be that you would be asked to fill out. So the first section, which is the orange section, is about your organisation. So we're just asking basic questions about your organisation, your name, whether you've got a website, when you were set up, what kind of organisation you are. Fairly standard stuff, that. And then the blue section is about the project that you want to fund. So this is about the work that you want to do. And we were asking about the name of your project, which of the categories that are listed in the guidance for priorities from the fund that you would like to work on. If your project covers more than one priority, we'd ask that you select the main priority for the project. We're asking you to give an overview of your project and then tell us which area it covers, when the project will start and end, the amount of money you've requested, and whether you received funding in 2019 from the CCG VCSE fund. We then ask you to talk in the section B, which is the green section, about the work that you wish to scale or adapt. And you've got some space in there to talk to us in a bit more detail about the work that you would like to do. So that's about your idea, whether you've done any work in that area previously, how you plan to scale or adapt the work, what you'd like to learn as an organisation from the project, and then what makes you confident that the work will be effective. So it might be that you've done some of this work before and you'd like to scale it up, or it might be that you visited a project in another area doing something and you'd like to introduce it to North Tyneside, that kind of thing. In section C, we ask you to tell us about the intended beneficiaries of the project. So that's who will benefit from the work, how many people you expect to work with, and what outcomes you are hoping to achieve from the project. And we ask you to list 3 outcomes for the project, and that will give us an idea about what it is that you would like to achieve. And there's some examples in there just to give you an idea about how you might create an outcome. We also ask for some budget information. So this is where you enter your project costs. If you need to break the costs into different boxes that have been provided, please do that without a pound sign or a comma. Computer says no if you put those in, so it's just a reminder on that, and it's listed on the information as well. And you can provide us some notes about the costs that you're entering as well. That might help you when you're putting together your budget. We've also got a checklist for you to send policies in, and then we ask for some bank details. We ask you to send some documents at a later stage if you're successful, and all that is listed when you're going through the application. What I would say is if you need some support to complete your application, Voda and Frank Gillander, who's the funding officer, would be able to do that. We just ask that you contact Voda as soon as possible to give them time to be able to support you with the application, because they're likely to be quite busy. And just also to say that the person that would be providing you with support to fill out the application would be separate from the application process. So you can go to Voda if you need a bit of assistance or you'd like to talk through your application. Just thought it would be worth highlighting that. The other thing I would say is that if you could get your application in when you've finished it, and don't leave it till, I think was it 12 o'clock? Don't leave it till 5 to 12 on the day of submission. We're just a bit worried about the system breaking if everyone presses send at the same time. So if you could just get it in when you've done it, that would be great. And we don't want anything to be kind of clunky. Also, if you're having a problem and it's 5 minutes before the application deadline, it might be a bit difficult to do that. So that was the kind of structure of the form, and there's also some guidance about what we're looking for. So was there something you wanted to say, Matt?
Yes, I just wondered if we could just go back to section B.
Yeah.
Would it be right to say that this fund is actually particularly interested in work that has been tested before and has a bit of a track record, and therefore, you know, that sort of scaling and adaptation is quite important, so that it's probably likely that applications will score better if they're not sort of brand new, untested ideas, but actually things that where there's a little bit of a track record.
So I think we would be looking at within that, what the question around that is the confidence that you think the idea will be effective, really. So that's how do you know that your idea would work? That's quite an important one, particularly if you are looking at doing something that you haven't done before or that is new to the area. Most things that are invented aren't actually new, which gives us some confidence, but we are happy with both things you've done before and things you haven't maybe done before but you've seen done in other places. So we are happy with both ideas for that. Does that answer the question, Matt?
Great, thanks. I wonder, should we move then to, would you mind if I sort of take over again at this point, because I'm just watching the clock? And,
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
okay. You okay, Robin, if I move to talk about the monitoring impact and learning?
Yes, please, Matt.
Great, okay. So I think one of the really exciting things about the approach that the Better Together group has taken to this fund is that it's got really quite an innovative approach to learning as part of it. And you'll be aware whenever you get funding from an awarding body, it comes with various requirements in terms of reporting and feeding back and making sure that you've been effective in achieving your aims for the work. I know that the Better Together group wants to be very proportionate and not overburden organisations with reporting, but there is a real ambition around using this to essentially to develop a what works approach in North Tyneside and to learn together. So I'm just going to work through a few slides that explain that. So if I just share this screen here. So the idea really is to learn together as we grow, using this this principle of an impact pyramid, where everybody's going to be expected to do the bare essentials of monitoring, to be able to report back on who have you been working with, where are they, how much stuff have you been doing. Then a little bit of an evaluative piece around, okay, and so what's changing, what's different because these people have accessed this particular project that you're operating. But then sliding up almost a little bit like a sort of a Maslow's hierarchy, that we actually have this kind of learning going on as well, where the organisations that have received funding are learning, but that the whole system is learning as well. And the idea behind that is that we will get together periodically with the grantees and facilitate essentially a learning community, so that it'd be really good for the sector across North Tyneside. So just to sort of work through this pyramid then, there's a sort of, the general bean counting that you'll all be used to. What sort of age cohort are you going to be working with? What sort of characteristics do people have? How frequently were they involved in your work, and for how long? So that's the sort of outputs bit. The evaluation piece, really trying to get to grips with and what is changing. Are you preventing certain bad outcomes? Are you maintaining people at a certain level of health, and or actually bringing improvements to people's lives? And in what aspects of people's lives is that difference being made? Is it to do with people's diet and nutrition, or is it to do with their social life and developing new friendships and support networks? How much are they changing? A little bit or a lot? And can you be sure that it's you who's making the difference, or are they also accessing another service down the road that's making a big difference too? And then this learning piece. So I'm just going to major on this for the next 5 minutes, because we're planning, and this is conditional on the funding, to attend. They'll be held locally, but there'll be 3 learning events gathered around the 3 themes, trying to build up this what works evidence base. So those 3 themes again, this is why it's important for you to think carefully about which of the themes your project is going to fit into. Theme 1, equal life chances for all. Theme 2, thriving places and communities. And theme 3, maintaining independence. And there's blue boxes here, just a little indication of the kind of change that the overall health and wellbeing strategy is hoping to see achieved. So whether that's to do with people making healthier lifestyle choices, or actually realizing health benefits in their own physical body, or whether it's to do with their sort of feelings of isolation and independence and that kind of thing. I'm going to show you a slide that will illustrate, map out the whole process over 18 months now then. So here we are today, sort of launching this grant program, and we've begun formulating the approach to the monitoring and evaluation, but we won't complete it until we've done the first event. Because the really important thing is, and I'll show you this in a second, that we need to know from you, and this is why it's so exciting, is that it's not predetermined. How will you as the sector determine what success looks like? And so coming out of that first event that will take place in May, some further thinking that will inform the first reporting deadline. So the kind of questions that you get asked will be based on the reflection that takes place. So quickly after this event in May. And then similarly, once you've reported out at the end of October on your results for the first 6 months, we'll all get together, discuss those, and then there'll be a second reporting 6 months later, and following that, an event to reflect together. So very much an open source approach to learning from one another's successes and failures, building trust and honesty around that. And then the final report out, after which a final report will be produced for the whole process. So just zooming in a little bit then, essentially we can describe these as little learning loops that are taking place, where the events really set the pace for the reporting, and we kind of build a sense of accountability to one another in the process and break down those barriers, those sort of them and us barriers between the funder and the delivery partner. And so the first one there that we come to in May, we'll be really looking carefully. So when you answer those questions on the form, so there's a question there that says, describe the difference this work seeks to make in addressing health inequalities, and what outcomes are you hoping to achieve? So Louise was just sharing those with us a minute ago. Those two questions are super important because that's essentially what we can reflect on together. The way that all the different applicants who are successful answer those questions will essentially set the agenda for this event, because we can use the answers to those questions to essentially harmonize the framework that will apply to this whole program for the 18 months that it runs. So I hope that made sense, those last few slides. I appreciate it was a little bit technical in terms of the timeline that we're working on, but the principle I think to take away is this idea that we want to learn together, we want to learn what works. We're going to have these little learning loops in the process where we get together, we set the agenda, we report, we come back together again, we reflect, we improve, we do the next report out. And so we do that 3 times over the 18 months. Okay, that's me done, Robin. I guess at some point we're probably going to get to Q&A. I think we've got one more thing to do before we get there, haven't we?
Brilliant. Yes, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Leslie, for a very good question in the chat, which was about us being able to be upfront with applicants about what policies will be required. So I think that's maybe something that we can add to the guidance document, just to be really clear. So we're not asking for people to actually submit their policies with the application, but as part of the due diligence, there are certain things. So I did put a response in the chat, just clarifying the things that we will be asking people to confirm they've got in place when they're completing their application. So maybe we update the guidance. Louise?
Thanks. I was just going to say there is some financial information that you would need to submit when you submit your application form, though. But the policies and procedures you would submit later on. But yeah, we need your things like accounts and management accounts when you're making your initial application.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. Okay, so before we move on to questions and answers, thank you, Mandy Black from North Tyneside Council, for joining us. Mandy's going to say a few words about the kind of support that could be available from her team for those of you when you're preparing your applications. Over to you, Mandy.
Okay. Nice to see everybody. First of all, I just thought I'd let you know what we do. So basically for North Tyneside Council, work for the sport and leisure teams, and we'll have a number of services and support on offer that will be able to help you throughout your obviously application process. So basically some of the stuff that we have on offer, I know some of you'll probably know what you want to do, or some of you might have some gaps on exactly what you want to do, so hopefully we can help you fill those. We have a number of facilities across North Tyneside, and they include athletics tracks, tennis courts, golf courses, playing fields, community centres and sports centres. So we do have a number of facilities available out there if people are struggling for facilities. We also work with quite a number of partners across North Tyneside who also have facilities available for anybody who might be struggling to find somewhere to do an activity. We can also give you support around your activity, whether that may be coaching qualifications, first aid training, safeguard training, and mental health first aid, which is really hot of the topic at the moment. We also provide little mini courses around stuff like disability awareness, which might include autism awareness or visually impaired, for example. We're going to be putting some dates together probably over the next month or so we can share them with Robin to obviously distribute. So if you think that would help towards what you want to achieve, then obviously you're more than welcome to come and sit on the course and get a bit more insight around that, depending on what your activity is. We're also here for a little bit of advice and support. I know some of you'll have new activities that you haven't done anything specific yet, and you might be very new to this. So I guess we are here to support you from today really onwards. So if you've got something in your application and you're not quite sure of, or you're not quite sure what qualifications or policies and procedures that you might need to follow to do an activity, then obviously we're here just to kind of like support you through it. Sometimes it might just be a little bit of information on setting up a new session and what do you need, what qualifications, like your risk assessments, that kind of stuff. Obviously any questions we're happy to answer. We'll also have good insight on partners and organisations, both internally and external. So if there's something we can't answer, we'll be able to help you and signpost you to the right place to get that information that you need. And I think that's really vital. Like the network is so important to this. We can also give you a little bit of help on how to grow and sustain your activities, because obviously sustainability is like really important. What you're going to do after the grant's finished, can you continue to do it? What help and support can we give you to be able to do that? And also on that, we have a number of sports equipment out there as well. So we have adapted cycling. So if you have a group, we've got equipment that you can hire that is like normal cycles or adapted cycles. We also have archery equipment. So if you wanted to set up an archery group or anything like that, and bearing in mind, obviously you would need somebody with like the right specialist qualification to take those sessions, whether we put you forward for that qualification or we provide the coaches for you. Either way, we're happy to work with you and see what we can do. But overall, I think it's just important to let you know where we are and what we do. And if you have got any questions or you're uncertain on something, then we're happy to help.
Thanks, Mandy. Brilliant offer of support. Mandy, there's a couple of people in the chat who are keen to understand how they would follow this up. I nearly put your email address in, but I thought I better check with you and leave you to decide. Would you mind just putting in the chat the most appropriate?
Yeah, of course I will do.
For people to follow up that offer of support. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so pretty much dead on time. I guess we've done our bit in terms of throwing a lot of information in your direction. As I say, the majority of the information we've gone through is available on Voda's website as downloads, and there's also an email contact on there should anyone have any specific queries. But I guess now is an opportunity, should anyone have any questions they would like to ask us, either in the chat or if people wanted to put their hand up and ask the question. I guess just to clarify, this isn't the only opportunity to ask questions. You can use the email address. Simone, I don't know if that was a clap or a request to ask questions. If it was a request would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Would this programme be open to people who are in the middle of a major funding project?
Simone, just for my benefit, I'm not sure I fully understand
Right.
the question.
We have been fundraising since last year, a major exercise for us, a holiday caravan. So it is very much tied up with the health and welfare of our community. So, and we've never been looking for large sums of money before. So, you know, we're feeling our way. And obviously it sounds as if this fund we would be well aligned with it. But since we've already started it, are we still able to come to you for funding?
So I probably will hand over to Louise in a moment, but I guess just to clarify that the aim of this fund is about funding new activity or additional activity rather than kind of co-funding work that's already been committed to. But we're absolutely open to this being a match fund. So if you've already accessed some of the money you need, then absolutely this fund could be used to get you to the point where you're then able to deliver activity. Louise, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add. Simone, just to check, is it the kinship carers you're involved with?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so just to say, Simone, if you take a look at the 3 priorities of the fund, which is equal life chances for all, thriving places and communities, and maintaining independence, when you write the form, to say what you want to do addresses one of those objectives is what I would say. So turn it the other way around. Tell us how your caravan and what you want to do would address one of those 3 priorities. That would be the important bit, I think.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Simone. Any other questions? Kath, is that your... Do you have your hand up?
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to unmute. First of all, Simone, we've talked quite a lot about your caravan. It's Kath Nixon, emails. Just nice to see your face. I think Voda put us in touch. Secondly, we have a green space that we're acquiring actually through the council at the moment, and our idea is to have a sensory space with a wheelchair swing. So that's our biggest project, but it sounds like a lot of criteria, and I'm very excited about that, to put our proposal forward for that. But we have lots of other smaller projects as well. Is it okay to put more than one project in, or are we just having to concentrate on one big one?
I think, Kath, I guess just for anyone who doesn't know Kath and her team, it's out of sight. I think we would be encouraging organisations to only put one application in, but it might be that your application might cover a few different activities.
Okay, well, it's generating that green space for a sensory garden for a lot of disadvantaged children, and anybody disabled in the area can use it.
Yeah, which sounds like a fantastic bit of work, and can see where that kind of fits in terms of the 3 priorities.
Thank you. That's
Thanks,
it.
Kath. Any other questions? Okay, I'll assume that that's because the hang on, there is a question. I was about to brag about how good our frequently asked questions document clearly is. Great, yeah. So good link to Wing Outdoors in terms of outdoor learning. Nice to see people sharing offers of support and resources. I'm just scrolling across 2 pages. So okay, so I'm assuming that there are no further questions. As I say, when you visit the part of Voda's website that hosts all this information, there is an email address that people can use should they have any kind of practical queries about the grant programme. Delighted that so many of you have joined us for this event. Really look forward to seeing the applications coming through to the second stage. Yeah, and I think, as Matt was alluding to earlier, if this programme doesn't quite fit with some of your ideas, then please do lean on Voda in terms of our funding advice programme, because we appreciate that other grant programmes are available. Okay, well, I think what we'll do is we'll close the event here. Again, thank you to those of you who have contributed to the event and those of you who have given your time to attend. Matt has his hand up.
Robin, just to say, maybe it'd be good for you and Louise, Chris and I just to have a 5-minute debrief at the end.
Yeah, no problem at all. Everyone else, you are free to go. Thanks, everyone.